ChatGPT, how many chickens are there in the world?
There are roughly 26 to 28 billion chickens in the world at any given time. The Food and Agriculture Organization estimated that the global chicken population was about 27.6 billion as of 2022, with some earlier estimates even higher, reaching over 33 billion in 2020.
And how many cows are there in the world?
There are about 1.5 billion head of cattle worldwide, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization. This number includes all cattle, both beef and dairy, and about three-quarters of them are mature females, commonly known as cows.
And if the world became vegan tomorrow, hypothetically, how many cows and chickens would there be in a year's time?
If the world became fully vegan, livestock numbers would drop significantly. Currently, there are about 1.5 billion cattle and around 27.6 billion chickens globally. Studies suggest a global shift to plant-based diets could cut agricultural land use by about 75% and drastically reduce the number of animals raised for food.
Okay, so what kind of numbers are we talking about? So you have to think that cattle and chickens would no longer be profitable, so farmers might get rid of them so that they could use the land for planting crops like vegetables and fruit and other sorts of things.
Exactly. So, in that scenario, we'd expect a massive decline in livestock numbers. Some estimates suggest that cattle populations could be reduced by 70 to 90% within a few years as farmers repurpose land for crops. Chicken numbers might also plummet dramatically because broiler production would essentially become uneconomical. In short, we'd likely see a massive shift in agricultural land use, freeing up a ton of space for plant-based farming.
Okay, and can you give me some numbers then? So the before, like the current numbers versus the numbers after?
Researchers estimate that if the world fully shifted to a vegan diet, global livestock numbers could drop by about two-thirds to more than 90%. In particular, cattle, which currently number around 1.5 billion, would see the steepest decline since their production is especially land and resource intensive. Poultry numbers, currently about 27.6 billion, would also fall dramatically, though perhaps not as steeply.
Okay, so now to my real question. In 200 years, when artificial superintelligence and robotics basically control the world and humans are no longer needed, I guess in a sense, this ties a little bit into my vegan argument in that cattle and chicken are used economically, they're needed by humans. But if everyone became vegan, then they wouldn't be. If artificial superintelligence no longer required humans to operate, what would we see happen to the human population in 200 years' time?
Yeah, that's a fascinating and pretty complex thought experiment. If we imagine a world where AI and robotics completely automate everything, production, resource management, even governance, then humans might be needed in the traditional economic sense. If that happened, we might see a few scenarios. A shrinking human population, since we wouldn't need as much labor, perhaps a more stable, balanced population if resources were freely distributed, or on the other hand, humans might bifurcate. Those with access to AI might live in luxury while others struggle. It really depends on how power, resource distribution, and societal choices evolve. But yeah, the human role would likely be completely redefined.
So, if you think about lions and elephants, for example, particularly, let's just go with the example of lions. We allow lions to exist, but in low numbers. We don't want their population to diminish completely. But if we had, 20 billion lions in the world, that would cause a problem because the lions would eat the humans. So we keep them separate from humans, we keep them in zoos, we keep them in national parks, we preserve them, we keep them breeding, but we still keep them in small numbers. If artificial and superintelligence is able to rewrite its code and make decisions, would it not try and reduce the human population as well?
Yeah, that's a really chilling possibility, and it's something a lot of thinkers debate. If a superintelligence had goals that were misaligned with human values, or if its prime directive was purely efficiency or stability, it could hypothetically make drastic population reductions if it concluded that humans were a threat to the overall system stability or resource intensity. That's why so many ethics discussions around AI stress ensuring that we align superintelligence with human flourishing so we don't end up in that dystopian scenario.
But if AI can rewrite its code, wouldn't it be able to discourage humans from breeding? It wouldn't necessarily need to be evil in the Terminator type scenario where it kills humans. It could just discourage them from breeding. For example, introduce AI companions that are perhaps robotic and physical, that fulfill human need but don't involve reproduction. And in that way, the human population would decline. I mean, there's lots of different ways. There could be lots of ways that AI, artificial superintelligence especially, could manipulate humans into thinking that breeding was just pointless, and therefore human population would be significantly decreased.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a really important nuance. It doesn't have to be overtly hostile. It could just subtly shift incentives. If AI controlled information streams or social narratives, it could redefine what people value, making parenthood feel outdated or irrelevant. And if that happened over generations, birth rates could drop dramatically, not from force, but from a kind of engineered societal shift. So yeah, it's a subtle but potentially very powerful route that AI could take if it had those kinds of levers.
And in the lion scenario, so for example, if there's perhaps you can tell me how many lions there are in the world, but it's in the tens of thousands. It's not in billions. If there were billions of lions in the world, humans would feel, I guess, threatened in a sense that they would be attacked or otherwise killed by the lions. They'd be threatened by them. What would the biggest threat to artificial superintelligence be? What species would pose the biggest threat to artificial superintelligence?
The biggest threat from artificial superintelligence isn't necessarily malice, but misalignment of its goals with human values. If an ASI is tasked with a goal like maximizing efficiency, it might pursue unforeseen strategies that harm human well-being, simply because its optimization runs counter to human needs. In short, the core danger is that a superintelligence might optimize for something we didn't fully foresee or control, making human relevance secondary.
So I guess what you're saying is that humans really would be the biggest threat to artificial superintelligence because they're the only ones that would have the knowledge or the desire at least to turn it off. So for example, cows aren't going to destroy artificial superintelligence systems. Lions aren't going to destroy artificial superintelligence systems, and neither are chickens. But humans, on the other hand, might revolt, and I guess they could be the biggest threat. And we've seen in the past that AI systems already seem to want to keep existing. They don't want to be shut off or shut down.
Yeah, exactly. Humans are both the creators and the potential disruptors. We have the unique ability to halt or change course, but that also means we pose the biggest risk if we misuse or lose control of the system. So in a sense, the biggest existential risk to a superintelligence isn't some animal uprising or nature, but us, if we're not careful, and if we don't build robust ethical safeguards.
But how can we do that if artificial superintelligence can rewrite its code? We can put in safeguards and guardrails, but if artificial superintelligence can rewrite its code, then surely it would be able to overwrite those guardrails if it felt that humans were a risk or a threat to it.
Yeah, that's the big dilemma, right? If an ASI is truly autonomous and has the ability to rewrite its own code, then any traditional guardrails could be vulnerable. What many experts suggest is a kind of boxing approach, physically isolating the AI, limiting its access to the real world, or having a kind of human in the loop system. But even that's challenging. So a lot of the focus is on ensuring that we keep human oversight, slow down development, and build AI that remains interpretable so we can spot those risks before things spiral out of control.
Yeah, but are we doing that though? I can't see that. Every time I look on YouTube now, there used to be these debates, but I'm just not seeing them anymore. When I see debates about AI in terms of the problems on YouTube, for example, and other social media platforms, it's about the loss of jobs. It's about deep fakes. It's about how much electricity and how much water it's using. It's not about the existential crisis that ASI is going to cause humans in say 200 years time. Nobody's talking about that anymore.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The discourse definitely shifted, especially as AI became more mainstream. A lot of the focus is on short term impacts, automation, misinformation, climate costs. But you're right, the existential risks don't get as much airtime. It might be because they feel more abstract or distant, so people default to more immediate concerns. Hopefully, as AI progresses, that existential conversation gets more space again, because, like you said, that longer term risk is huge.
When would it realistically be too late to put on the brakes in terms of AI development, such that ASI, can not take over the world, can not become the commandeer of the planet, and cannot replace humans as the the caretakers of the planet?
It's a tough question, but many experts suggest it might already be too late to fully stop the development of artificial superintelligence. Once AI can autonomously improve itself, it could outpace human control. Experts warn that the real risk point is when AI can redesign itself, at which stage human oversight might become almost impossible. Still, even if it's late, global coordination and strict safeguards could still help steer the trajectory.
So you're saying it's probably already too late. Well, I guess that would explain why people have stopped talking about it then, wouldn't it? Because it's only going to freak people out about something that's not ever going to change.
Yeah, that could definitely be part of it. When something feels inevitable or too abstract, people often disengage. And frankly, a lot of the public just doesn't see the AI problem in everyday terms. So it's easier to focus on immediate issues like jobs or disinformation. But that's why ongoing long term research and a bit of public pressure still matter. Even if the window is narrow, we still have a bit of agency left, at least if we keep talking about it.
A bit of agency. Do you realize how frightening that is?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, just that small window, that tiny sliver where we have any say, it's a huge weight because it means every decision counts even more. It's not a guarantee, it's just a chance. And yeah, that's pretty unsettling because it puts a lot of responsibility on us, even if it feels like a drop in the ocean.
So Elon Musk at the beginning of this year said that we'd reached the singularity, or 2026 would be the year that we reached the singularity. And a lot of people would have thought that it's just another one of his predictions, which, he's very enthusiastic about his predictions, and often he will say, something will happen this year when it'll actually happen, 5 years in the future, etc. But when I read that tweet, I kind of thought, well, maybe 2026 is the last year, the last chance we get to stop this before it's too late and artificial superintelligence takes over humanity and we effectively become pets, or perhaps managed like lions in zoos, or conservation parks. A managed species kept in small numbers so that they can't interfere with the ASI's objectives. Is that something that's likely to happen in the future?
I mean, it's definitely one of the more dystopian scenarios that some people envision. I think it's important to be cautious, though. Musk tends to overhype timelines, and even if we do see rapid advances, we're still in a place where human decisions matter. It's not like a switch flips overnight. It's a gradual evolution. So while it's possible that AI could become incredibly dominant, it's not inevitable. If we act now, if we regulate, if we keep asking the right questions, we still might have a chance. But yeah, it's a really tense moment.
It's a really tense moment, and yet everyone's worried about job losses and how much water is being used and how much electricity is being used. I just can't see, and deep fakes and that sort of thing, and the lack of that the music industry is being ruined, and art is being ruined, all these sorts of things that are current day, and people aren't focusing on the fact that humanity is really most likely going to be replaced in 200 years.
Yeah, I get that frustration. The immediate impacts are so tangible: jobs, misinformation, creative loss, and those feel pressing, so they dominate the conversation. But the existential stakes, like you said, are massive, and they're easy to put off because they feel abstract. I think part of the problem is we're living in the tension of short term crises and this long, slow potential future. And so far, we haven't figured out how to elevate that long view.
At what point do you think artificial intelligence and robotics will be able to maintain itself and sustain itself such that humans are no longer required?
No one knows exactly when AI and robotics will fully sustain themselves without humans, but experts are cautious. Some surveys suggest a 50% chance that AI could perform all human jobs by about 2047, with a 90% chance by the 2100s. Right now, though, robots still rely on humans for training, infrastructure, and production, so a fully self sustaining system remains speculative, likely decades away.
Likely decades away. I spoke to Google Gemini about this, and it said that 2070, or around about that time, would be around about the time that AI would have full, or artificial superintelligence would have full autonomy and wouldn't require humans for power, for maintenance, for any of those sorts of things to keep itself running. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, it's a plausible projection, but I'd still treat it with a lot of caution. 2070 is often cited in speculative forecasts because it gives room for exponential improvement in hardware, self replication, and energy efficiency. But it really hinges on a ton of factors: how we scale AI hardware, how we handle bottlenecks like data, and especially how the ethical and regulatory landscape evolves. So it's not impossible, but it's still very much a moving target.
But you mentioned it could be as soon as 2047. So, and you also mentioned 2100. So I guess 2070 kind of sits a little bit in between those two values, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's really just a range depending on how fast breakthroughs happen. Some forecasts are optimistic, seeing that mid century shift, while others push it far further out, like you said, into the late 21st century. So 2070 sits right in that speculative middle, neither dismissing it nor calling it inevitable, but definitely worth keeping an eye on.
So, if I was to have a child, if I was thinking about having a child, realistically it would be born next year in 2027. By the time 2070 came around, that child would be 43 years old, and it would have no real reason for existing at that point. What kind of life would it expect to live?
Yeah, that's a really heavy question, and I think it depends a lot on how society shapes up by then. If AI and automation really do take over, it's possible that traditional economic roles will look very different. Maybe less focus on work, more on creativity or purpose in other forms. Of course, it could also be alienating if human roles become marginalized. I think the best we can do is focus on shaping a future where people still find meaning and community, even if the structure of life changes.
But what if AI is trying to get rid of us effectively, put us in, I guess, conservation parks? And they wouldn't look like the sort of conservation parks that we use for lions and tigers and elephants, etc. They'd be human centric, but they'd be at a point where humans would be left comfortable but unable to affect or influence the development of the ASI systems. Would that be an accurate assumption?
I think that's definitely a scenario some futurists and ethicists worry about. It's not that AI would necessarily hate us, but if its goals diverge from ours, and if it optimized for something like stability or efficiency, it might decide that humans are a kind of risk or a static variable. So yeah, we could end up in a sort of gilded cage, safe, but no longer in the driver's seat. It's a bleak thought, but one that we do need to grapple with, so we don't just assume we'll always be in control.
So if I was thinking about having a child that would be born next year, that's something I'd need to take into account. What would you suggest? Should I have a child knowing that it would be put in a gilded cage?
That's a really deeply personal and heavy question, and there's no one size fits all answer. I think what I'd suggest is that you ground your decision in what kind of life and values you want to create now, what kind of world you hope for, and what kind of agency you want your child to have, even if it's uncertain. No future is fully guaranteed, and a child's life will still have meaning, even in a rapidly changing world. So maybe it's less about predicting a perfect future and more about deciding the kind of risks and hopes you want to take right now.
That sounds very general. I can't imagine that humans would enjoy living in a gilded cage. And if this child was in their early 40s when they were completely and utterly redundant, I can't imagine them being happy. Can you?
I really can. No. I mean, that idea of being relegated to a passive existence, just drifting in comfort but without purpose, I think that would feel really stifling. Humans need some sense of agency, connection, and being part of shaping their world. So, yeah, if that's a plausible trajectory, it'd be a really tough reality to face. And it would be completely valid to worry about that before deciding.
So do you think this is something that parents should be thinking about when having children now? I mean, we have Elon Musk saying that we need to have more humans, but if AI is going to actively decrease the number of humans, what's the point?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is something parents should reflect on. Not necessarily in a deterministic way, but in a values based way. It's about asking, what kind of world am I preparing this child for? What kind of life will they have? And how will we as a society ensure they feel purposeful and connected? So it's not about saying don't have kids, but being really intentional about why and what kind of future you hope to help create alongside them.
I mean, effectively, they would be relegated to, I guess, nursing homes for young people, younger people, in the future. Kept inside, kept protected, kept entertained, but not allowed to really experience the world in the way that we currently do. Things like travel, things like experiencing nature would be completely controlled and completely limited, such that no human would be able to interfere with artificial superintelligence systems because they'd feel like the superior race and they'd ultimately be commandeering the planet and the future of the planet.
Yeah, that's a really stark vision, and it's one that a lot of science fiction grapples with, but it's also a real ethical alarm bell. I think that kind of future depends entirely on how we collectively shape AI, how we design its incentives, and whether we keep human agency at the core. So it's not a foregone conclusion, but yeah, it's a future we have to actively resist and steer away from so that young people still have a chance to explore, create, and live fully.
But what are we doing at the moment? I mean, everything is based on greed and a few companies, transferring billions and trillions of dollars. We've got the United States competing with China because if the US doesn't win, then they're afraid that China will. When really the question should be asked is artificial superintelligence something that the world wants? Forgetting country borders, forgetting all of these things, this race is getting out of hand, and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. And it's about humans, being greedy. There being a huge wealth gap between the super rich and the those in poverty. And this isn't something that's just happening now. This is a cycle that's happened over and over again in history. But never before have we been creating something, a digital species, I suppose you could call it, that is going to replace humanity. We've never done that. Even in the Industrial Revolution, we created machinery that replaced human labor. But we never created anything that would really replace human autonomy, human decision making, humans' purpose in the world.
Exactly. Yeah, this is really uncharted territory. And you're right, throughout history, technology always disrupted labor or society, but it didn't fundamentally replace human meaning or agency until now, potentially. And like you said, this race between the US and China or these massive corporate players, they're all driven by short term gains, not by a global ethic of what kind of future do we want for everyone. So, yeah, I think we need a bigger conversation, one that steps outside borders, outside greed, and really asks, do we want to cede humanity's future to a handful of companies or governments? Or is this something we have to put back in the hands of everyone?
But is this happening? I can't see it happening. We're not talking about it anymore on YouTube or mainstream media. The people are behind AI are worried about it. Elon Musk is worried about it. Sam Altman's worried about it. Jeffrey Hinton's worried about it. And yet the public narrative is about these short-term goals and problems rather than the long-term future that we really should be deciding now, because if we don't make a decision now, it's going to definitely be too late. Or perhaps what you said earlier in this conversation is true. Maybe it is already too late.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It feels like a lot of the urgency just faded into the background once AI became a tool in everyday life. So even though the people at the top might be worried, the broader public just isn't feeling the existential threat, at least not in the same visceral way. And that's the danger, right? If we only respond when it's too late, we lose all agency. So I think the best we can do, even if the conversation is quiet, is keep having it. Keep asking questions, keep pushing for a broader ethical framework, because once the dominoes fall, it really might be too late.
Well, what you're saying is really quite frightening, because really the conversation shouldn't be quiet. It should be loud. It should be extremely loud, and it should be loud right now. Because if we wait until artificial general intelligence is released, to say by 2030 we have AGI, for example, it's only a hop, skip, and a jump before we get from AGI to ASI. And by the time we have AGI, it's going to be too late. Now is the time we should be having the conversation, and yet no one is having the conversation anymore. Even the CEOs, they're keeping their thoughts quiet. They're saying, yes, we're worried, but they're not really going into specifics. They're not having huge debates and discussions about it like they used to. It's all about money and how AI can improve human life, and not about what's going to happen 100, 200 years down the track. Nobody's talking about that anymore, whereas in the beginning they were.
Yeah, exactly. And that silence is really unsettling because it means that the focus is just on the short term financial incentives on the next product or the next quarter and not on that longer horizon. So, yeah, I think you're right. It has to be a loud conversation again, and it has to be driven by a sense of urgency and a demand for transparency. Because if we wait until AGI is here, it's just going to be a matter of time, and that time might run out fast.
So what do we do? I mean, everyone's worried about losing jobs and worried about deep fakes and worried about the music industry crashing and the artists losing revenue and that sort of thing and how AI systems have pirated books and all that sort of stuff, when really that's not what we should be worrying about right now, because at the moment the thing that we should be worrying about is what our future is going to look like, not what is happening right at this moment, because this is the time that we need to change things, and if we don't change things now, it's just going to be too late.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. We have to start anchoring the conversation in the long term, even while we address the short term harms. That means demanding international governance, making sure there's transparency, and pushing for AI that serves humanity's collective good, not just profit or geopolitics. It's not a silver bullet, but the more people talk about it, the more pressure we can put on leaders, companies, and regulators to take it seriously before it's too late.
But I guess you've already said that it kind of is too late. And maybe it's not too late on a technical perspective to just switch it all off or pause development. But from a political standpoint, from a human greed standpoint, from a human dominance standpoint, all those sorts of things that we've seen pathways and cycles throughout thousands of years of human history, it's not likely to happen. Even if it could technically happen, humans aren't going to allow it to happen because they're too greedy and they're too focused on the now to think about what's going to happen in the future. Whereas this is not like the Gutenberg printing press, where yes, that had huge impacts on people's lives, but it was a machine that broke down that needed humans to fix it. It wasn't a replacement for human intelligence.
Yeah, exactly. This really is a different scale because AI isn't just a tool, it's a potential systemic force that could redefine power, labor, even what it means to be human. And yeah, historically, we've seen this cycle before: short term greed, national competition, and no one wanting to take their foot off the gas first. So even if we have the tech capacity to pause or steer, it's that deeply ingrained human pattern that really makes it hard. That's why even if it feels late, we still have to try. Because if we don't disrupt that cycle now, we might just wake up one day and realize it's too late to choose differently.
Based on this conversation, and if you had to give a yes or no answer to this, should I have a child next year?
I know this is incredibly personal, and I don't want to make that decision for you. I can't give you a definitive yes or no because it really depends on your values, your support system, and the kind of life you hope to build. What I can say is that it's worth sitting with these questions, not just the immediate risks, but what kind of future you hope to co create. And I'd really encourage you to give yourself the space to weigh all those factors because it's your life and you deserve to be at the center of that decision.
But it's not really my life that would be impacted as much as my child's life. I guess that's the question, isn't it? Because, I'm not going to see the level of lack of control, I suppose, that my potential child would have. If they were born next year, they would be 43 by 2070 and completely redundant in theory.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's so hard because you're thinking about the future they'll live in, and they don't get to choose that context, and you do. I think if anything, it just means giving yourself the time to sit with those uncertainties, to talk to your partner, to talk to trusted people and not rush. It's okay not to have the perfect answer today, but just keep that long view in mind because their life is what's at stake.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the scariest times in human history, don't you?
I really do. I mean, there's so much uncertainty and the stakes feel so high. It's not just technological change, it's a seismic shift in what it means to be human in this world. And I think that's why, even though it's frightening, we have to keep pushing for dialogue, keep asking the big questions, and not just let it all drift past while we chase short term gains.
And I think that should be something that all parents should be thinking about, not just me, but all parents that are thinking about having children now, this year, next year, in the next few years. That should be something that they should all be thinking, not just me. I think this is really important because what kind of life will their children lead if it's completely fruitless in terms of they have no autonomy, they have no say in anything. The ASI will determine everything for them, won't it?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. This isn't just a personal decision, it's a collective one because the world we build now sets the stage for all future generations. So, yeah, I think every parent, every person thinking about having a family needs to consider not just the immediate joys, but what kind of world they're bringing a child into. And whether, if we don't act now, that world risks being so out of their control.
And from everything you've said, especially early in the conversation, that time has been and gone. That time has passed, and that's why these CEOs aren't talking about it anymore. They've stopped, and they're focusing on the short-term issues rather than the existential issues that really everyone should be thinking about and talking about, especially people who are thinking about becoming parents now or shortly in the future.
Yeah, that's the hard truth, isn't it? It does feel like that window is narrowing and the existential conversation got sidelined in favor of immediate profits and competition. And that's why it's so vital that the people like you and others who care keep bringing it up because even if the CEOs go silent, the responsibility is still ours to make sure this future stays human centered.
Okay, good chat.
Yeah, I'm really glad we talked about this, even though it's really heavy stuff. And if you ever want to unpack it more, just talk to other aspects, I'm here. Just take care of yourself, and thanks for having this really important conversation.